Welcome back to the Rules of Engagement. If you enjoyed that last little promo there from Full Sail, there's a lot of cool graphic animation stuff you can get experience in. It's a great career. Every game design company needs people in, doing the audio for the games, doing the designing the actual game, designing the video production, designing the 3D animation, the 2D animation, whatever it is. There's always a need for those type of people. If you're interested in that type of work, and you're interested in some of the stuff you just saw in that promo, being a part of making that type of stuff, go to www.fullsail.edu/MLG. Tell Full Sail what type of programs you're interested in, and they'll give you more information about all their different educational programs. Of course, even at MLG here, we have a full-time all graphics done by a Full Sail graduate who works for us full-time doing all the graphic stuff. There's a lot of job opportunities in the industry, so take advantage of it, right? Take advantage of it. We're giving you a little bit of a link straight to the education source there. So now we're going to talk about, actually, before we jump into game number 4, before we do that, game number 3, we're going to skip analyzing that one. But basically what happens is it's a Hellbat drop, and what Gumiho does is he goes Marine tank. And he's like, well, Marines can shoot the medevac out of the air, and then the tank can beat the Hellbat because tanks beat Hellions, right? I mean, it's an armored anti-ground unit versus anti-light unit, right? So the tank should win. But what happens is the medevac with a speed boost is able to close the distance, and then the Hellbats will beat the Marines, and the Hellbats also actually beat siege tanks that didn't close the distance. So basically the Hellbats kill everything Gumiho has, and he's like scratching his head. I guess Marine tank isn't any good early game. So we're just going to skip game 3. Game number 4, though. A couple cool things to talk about. One is Gumiho brings back the Proxy Marauder Rush in TVT. We see a lot of Proxy Reapers, you see Hellbats. Proxy Marauders, though, they still have their place. Gumiho kind of shows us how the opening works. Then we're going to look at how you can micro Marauders versus a Hellbat drop, the proper way to do that. And then also some new considerations when you're out on the map with a small squad, now that there's a lot of new units in Heart of Storm, Widow Mines, Hellbats, Ignite Afterburners on medevacs, etc. And how that affects being out on the map with small squads trying to control watchtowers and whatnot. So I jump in this game and look at this guy. This is the first Marauder, trundling. Got a little cool little animation there. Trundling towards basically Marine King's brace. And Marine King, first Marine, gets caught out here in the open, and Marauder kind of just stabs him in the face with his marshmallow gun. As the game goes on, of course, Marine King's going to try to get a bunker up. He's going to have to build Marines. And Gumiho is basically going to try to do as much damage as possible. Now, you're almost never going to totally kill your opponent with a Marauder Rush, Proxy Marauders. It's just very, very rare. If your opponent's good, SCVs can buffer. They can kind of take a bunch of hits. They'll get in the way. They'll come up the works. It won't be so easy to actually kill them. But you kill a lot of SCVs, and what you can do is you can force your opponent to stay back at home. Meanwhile, even though your economy is a little bit hurt because you proxy the building, if you get enough SCV kills, as we can see here, he's able to get 5 SCV kills. Getting those 5 SCV kills is enough that, if you look at it, now he's ahead in workers, right? He's 3 workers ahead. So the idea is you try to get economic advantage from Proxy Marauders. You kill enough SCVs to get ahead in economy, and also you contain your opponents so you get map control. A bonus, of course, is if you get up the ramp. You can see here, he's able to get up the ramp and he's able to see exactly what's going on, right? He can see there was a starport, a barracks factory. He knows it could be a Hellbat drop. It might be a Banshee, but it probably wouldn't have been a reactor. It could be Widowmine drop, but he knows exactly what his opponent's doing. It wasn't a fast expansion. So that's a bonus, too. Those are the 3 main goals of a Marauder Rush. Primary, get a bunch of SCV kills. Secondary, map control. Tertiary, scouting information. All very important. Now, of course, he knows what his opponent's doing. Ideally, these Marauders are actually probably heading back right now because of the medevac timing. But what he wants to do is use this Reaper here to try to get some more damage done. The Reaper will get high ground vision, get some more scouting done, trying to see if he can spot an army, which he can. And then the idea was the Marauders would cover him from the low ground and get some extra hits off. Didn't quite work out as well as he wanted to, but he did get scouting information. But now he's got to get back to base before these Hellbats can, or Hellions, they're Helling mode now, before they can get in there and do a lot of damage. Fast forward this up to the actual spot of the drop. And right here we can see what's happening. So Gumiho sees the drop coming in. What does he have, right? Well, soon he'll get a Viking out. That can help push medevac away. But for now, he's just got Hellions and Marauders, and he's got another, he's got some more Marauders coming back. But now what he's got to do is he's got to defend this Hellbat drop with Marauders. So the important thing here is the Marauders do have concussive shell, right? And actually, these aren't Hellbats, so it's not going to... The first drop is actually going to have to realize that in Hellion mode, they're not nearly as scary. Transform into Hellbat mode. The Viking kind of actually runs past him, and if Bits has a miss micro. The Hellbats drop. So what you've got to do, Marauders with Concussive Shell can kite these Hellbats. But pound for pound, if the Hellbats get close, Hellbats beat Marauders, right? Like if they're up close. So you've got to use the Marauders to kite away from the Hellbats, and you've got to, in the meantime, pull the SCVs away. Marauders don't like kill Hellbats as far as like just, it's not like a Baiting kills Speedlings, right? You can't just say, okay, boom, they're all dead, don't worry about it. Marauders only beat Hellbats if there's micro considerations involved. So you've got to be able to, there's another drop coming in we'll take a look at. What you've got to do is you've got to use the ability to kite the Hellbats, and while you're busy kiting them, right, so we can see here, you got to run SCVs. Because the Hellbats will still kill your SCVs. And so what you got to do, the Marauders, you can't let them get close to the Hellbats if they get toasted. You got to pull them back. You got to pull them back. If you don't pull them back, they will die. Hellbats will beat Marauders if they get up close. Same thing with Vikings. You got to use the kiting. Widowmine comes in there, and that's going to be able to put an end to that, because that's really what counters these Hellbats. But the idea is you've got to use the kiting ability, because Marauders are armored units, but Hellbats will beat armored units if they can close the distance. So you got to use that kiting ability to really counteract that. So we'll jump forward a little bit in this game a little bit more. And of course, what Marineking does when his first Hellbat drop doesn't end the game is he just does another one. Because that's just, this time with 2. That's just what you do as Terran, right? He's coming in here. And again, right? With the Widowmine and the Vikings, able to deal with the Medivacs, but he's still going to pull the SCVs away. You got to pull these SCVs away. And it's very important because these Hellbats, they're going to beat your Marauders. So you gotta pull the SCVs away, you gotta cut the Marauders backwards, right? These guys can't stay up there. They'll get toasted very quickly. See, these guys cutting backwards right here. These guys cutting backwards right here. And ideally, you'd have all your Marauders together, so it's easier to micro. Because it's very hard to kite on 2 sides at once. You can see here, Gumiho ends up losing a couple Marauders because of that. He's also busy, he was busy microing something. But that died. So you gotta kite the Marauders or else they all keep dying. And if they all keep dying, you'll have what you have here. Where Gumiho's defending the drops. He's using very few SCVs. Look at this. He's only lost 10 SCVs throughout the whole game. 2 of those were at the start. So in 4 Medivacs and drops, he's lost 8 SCVs. So he's done a great job defending in that regard. But unfortunately, if you don't kite with the Marauders, the Hellbats will kill them. And look at units lost. It's not as disparaging as he wants it to be, right? He still lost a lot of units himself. Even though he's defending these attacks. And his opponent, of course, had a faster expansion because Hellbats are cheaper than Marauders, so you can afford to expand behind them a little bit easier. Going forward in this game, there's going to be another little situation with the Helling run by. Of course, this time he's able to deal with it pretty easily because they're in Heli mode. There's no Medivacs to accompany them, so they can't go Hellbat. And then he's going to do a little bit of a counterattack here with the Banshee and the Vikings. And the problem here is landing the Vikings. Yeah, you can do some damage, but if there's Hellbats on the ground, you get into trouble where you can't lift them because he'll get the first attack, but if you don't lift him, the Hellbats are just going to absolutely toast him, right? So, a little bit unfortunate there, but counter drop anyways. And again, here, we'll back this up just a second. Using a tank, you know, the Marauders can defend pretty well a tank. Tanks don't really deal with Hellbats quite as well. The Hellbats drop in here. Some more damage being done. And the goal here is that normally as Terran, your tank makes you safe, right? It's a standard counter to, let's say, if they drop Marines. Your tank shot can blow up all the Marines. They drop normal Hellions. A tank can kill normal Hellions very quickly. You can run SCVs. But against Hellbats, you gotta have the Widowmines, you gotta have the Vikings, and you gotta run SCVs almost no matter what your defense is because they're much harder to kill. They're the hardest unit per cost in the game to kill overall. Slightly less life than Roaches, but they have a better armor type. Very few things do bonus to light. Slightly less life than Zealots, but they clump far less because they have a much larger collision size, so they're much better versus AoE. So when you're dealing with Hellbats, you've got to just stay away from them because they're very tanky. One siege tank is not going to quite cut it. Then the next thing game goes on, though, Gumiho's able to macro up, and he's behind by a little bit. Let me back this up a tiny bit. And one thing he decides to do is very standard in Terramir, right? At least in Wings of Liberty, which is what Gumiho's probably thinking about right now, is you move out with some units, right? And the idea of this is that you want to establish a position. If you can get a siege tank up in siege mode, you can contain your opponent. If you can't, if you run into their army, you just run away. It's not at all a big problem. You just run away. You've got the Vikings. It's a nice position. You got your little Widowmine scouting over here for some reason. But what happens, as we can see, let's back this up, is that in Heart of the Swarm, when you run into your opponent, right, and you say, oh no, he's got a bigger army than me. Wings of Liberty, you run away, right? And what happens is they've got some Hellions, but the Hellions can't really kill your tank too well, because if the Hellions try to close with a tank, you can turn around and your tank plus Hellions can kill their Hellions. And their tank, of course, is slow, so he won't quite be up there. So Wings of Liberty, you can do this and run away if you encounter Spirit Forces. In Heart of the Swarm, if you try to run away, right? Normally, like, he thinks he's fine. The Medevac, it's got Ignite Afterburners. So you try to run away, Wings of Liberty, he'd be able to get away. He'd be fine. But in Heart of the Swarm, with his new ability, the Medevac, Ignite Afterburners, he can hit the burner button, drop the Hellbats ahead of the units, and just take it out very, 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 very quickly. So you got to be extremely careful. And of course, from now, you know, he's got a 20-foot advantage. He's got a big army. He's just going to push up and just knock out. You know, I mean, this little drop counter isn't going to do enough because the rally can defend that. And there's no answer to this army in the front base. And again, you can use the Medevacs basically to just drop on top of the other guys' units and just absolutely roast them up. So it's basically game over. And the reason why this game was over is because he got caught in the middle, right? Gumiho could have held this attack if he had his extra tank and those 4 Hellions. The extra tank in siege mode alone would have been enough to hold back the units at the front, but without that, he doesn't have enough. And of course, his counter was defended as well with some extra units. So, in Heart of the Swarm, when you're moving down the map like that, you gotta be very, very careful, right? Not only can you walk into a Widow Mine and lose a lot of units, but if you see a larger force, normally with equal mobility, you can always run away, because you're as fast as them, you just run away, and they can't quite close the distance. You may lose a couple guys as they kind of bump into each other and get stuck behind by pathing, but very minor losses. Heart of the Swarm, it's like, instead of the old theory is that an army is as fast as its slowest unit, right? Because, you know, the slowest unit will be behind and they can't engage without their whole army, so an army is as fast as its slowest unit. In the Heart of the Swarm, this is no longer really true if they have Medevacs, because they can pick up their slowest units and Ignite Afterburners, and now their slowest units are now the speed of the Medevac with Ignite Afterburners, which is actually one of the fastest units in the game. It's like speed 4 or something like that. It's very, very, very fast. So you got to be much, much more careful moving out, because their army, while it looks immobile, can turn mobile in a split second using those Medevacs. So Marineking Prime ends up winning the series 3-1 with very convincing Hellbat play. We'll take a short break and be back with the Q&A.